Gunforce. It's a name that demands respect. Gunforce. It's a name that exudes excitement. Gunforce. It's a name that rivals Truxton in unparalleled glory. Gunforce is a name that has done a terrible disservice with a shoddy video game. And I am never, ever doing that again, because that hurts my throat, for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ. Ah, man, what a disappointment this turned out to be. So imagine this, you're walking around this foreign market. You find a little used game shop, and then you spot it. This relatively random Super Nintendo game packed behind a glass display with one commanding title. Gunforce. Now that's a great fucking name for a badass motherfucking video game. So you buy the game, you bring it home, you pop it into your Super Nintendo, or equivalent clone system these days. And then you play it, and it's the biggest letdown you've ever witnessed. But why? Why is Gunforce the Super NES equivalent of Blue Balls? Well, the reasons are numerous, but first some basic information to get out of the way. Released in 1992 courtesy of Irem and based on the 1991 arcade game of the same name, Gunforce is a run-and-gun side-scrolling shooter where you control an armored soldier, marine dude, whatever, who must infiltrate enemy territory, ravage their troops, and destroy their outposts with 5 levels of gunforcing action. You can run, jump, shoot in 8 directions, pick up a variety of weaponry ranging from automatic weapons to flamethrowers and bazookas, and every so often you'll get to helm a bunch of artillery and vehicles, from simple turrets to military jeeps to even the chopper. By all accounts, Gunforce should give Contra a run for its money, except it didn't, and it doesn't. Now, I've never played the original Gunforce arcade game. Shit, I didn't even know there was an arcade version of Gunforce until a short time before starting this review, so I can't tell you how that stacks up to this or vice versa. But I'd have to imagine the arcade original is better than what we have here because... Folks, I'm going to begin with the biggest pet peeve I have with Gunforce, and that is the control, specifically the button mapping. Now imagine any side-scroller on the Super NES, and you know how controls generally work. The B button is reserved for jumping, and the Y button is reserved for shooting, attacking, whatever the case may be. For this controller, this SNES gamepad, it's the most ideal setup, though some games will let you remap your buttons to your heart's content. Gunforce dares to be different. Here, the Y and X buttons are your jump buttons, while the B and A buttons are your shooting buttons. Not only that, but the L and R buttons also make your soldier jump. Why would you do this? It feels so fucking awkward because you're used to controls being a certain way that makes sense, and this reverse setup doesn't fucking work. Who designed this shit, and why were they allowed to... Oh. Wait. Bits. Bits Studios was a British studio responsible for developing a number of video games during most of the 1990s, most notably a number of Spider-Man games on the Game Boy and NES. One quirk in those games? The B button jumps and the A button attacks, which annoys me greatly, but it's something you could kinda sort of adjust to. This, on the other hand, not so much. The fuck's wrong with you folks? And what makes it worse is that you cannot remap your buttons. You're stuck with this shit. The title screen has no options menu. It just tells you to press start, and a second player can join in while you're playing the game, because this is a 2-player game, it's 2-player simultaneous, but we cannot be bothered to add a 2-player option on the fucking title screen. Now if you press select on the title screen, you can bring up an option to toggle the game difficulty, of which there are 3 skill settings to choose from, but that's about it. You have a hidden difficulty select, but no way to fix the awful button mapping, and I'm amazed by how many reviews I've come across for this game, and almost none of them mentioned this one glaring issue. Maybe they were distracted by your Marine's moon-jumping prowess within an atmosphere. Yeah, this doesn't feel clunky at all. Fucking hell. Another part of it might have something to do with the fact that Gunforce is just too damn slow. Let's ignore that the arcade original apparently runs quicker than this. Gunforce feels like a game that's on the verge of crapping out at any given moment, given how slow it runs. When your main character outruns the screen scrolling, that's a bit of a problem, especially for a run and gun where all it takes is one bad touch to bite the dust, and you need to be aware of what's ahead of you, and you can't really do that when the game is struggling to keep up with you rather than the other way around. One needs to see this bit with the chopper as it's practically touching the right side of the screen as it's scrolling, and the scrolling is deathly slow. Like I'm afraid this is going to crap out on me at any moment. Thankfully it hasn't, which means the pain continues, such as it is. One thing working in your favor, however, is that the only things that could kill you in Gunforce are bullets, explosions, and potential hazards. Touching other enemy soldiers will not kill you. That's a good thing, because you need all the help you could get here. Now, as it pertains to the gameplay, well, the concept is certainly unique, at least. Yes, Gunforce is a run-and-gun similar in vein to the Contra titles, but the added quirk of artillery and vehicle control does give this game something distinct. Depending on the vehicle, you'll not only have a heavy-duty weapon to mow down enemies, but you could also take multiple hits before that piece of equipment is eventually totaled. Of course, one lucky shot to the head is all it takes to do you in, regardless of whether you have a vehicle or not. And in addition to trying to survive the mayhem, there is also a time limit that you have to try and clear the stage within, or else you'll lose a life. You do get the respawn at the point you died in, and the game does give you a generous 4 lives and 3 continued credits to start with, to tackle 5 stages of action, and in theory, Gunforce is a relatively short game that is prolonged by generally shoddy performance, and ultimately, it's the shoddy performance in general that really holds the game back. Maybe if this game ran a little quicker, or if your control button mapping wasn't total shit, then this would have been mildly decent action fare at least, I suppose. I'll give Gunforce this much. It's not a bad looking game at least. Not the greatest looking thing ever, it's not going to blow your socks off or anything like that, but I've seen worse looking games on the Super Nintendo. The sprites are rather large and everything looks like what it should at least. Tanks look like tanks, walls look like walls, rocky terrain, grass, stuff, things of that nature. One unique bit is that whenever you get a new weapon, the Marine actually changes weapons. I mean, the sprite actually holds a different weapon compared to what you had before whenever you get a new weapon, and that's a unique little touch that I actually kind of like and didn't really notice until later after the fact. Some of the animation's kind of iffy, like your climbing sprite, but other than that, looks okay, I guess. Sadly, much like the gameplay, Gunforce is let down by its audio component, most notably the Limp Dick soundtrack and the less than stellar sound effects. You have some generally weak-ass sound effects for gunfire and explosions, and as far as the music goes, a game like this with a name like Gunforce should have banging tracks to carry the action, and what you got are these lame-sounding, empty tracks with simple instrumentation that some would argue sound like something a 3-year-old would compose, and I'd counter that an unborn fetus could probably compose a better soundtrack than this. What even is this? Gunforce on the Super Nintendo is a game that needed more time to cook. It runs slow, it controls awkwardly, it doesn't sound all that great, and yet it's not completely unsalvageable, it's not completely unplayable despite the awful button mapping. And there's enough unique bits to it that there's something worthwhile here that's buried underneath the less than stellar bits. There is an arcade version of Gunforce that apparently runs and plays better, so I guess that's the way to go if you really want your Gunforce fix. But as far as this Super Nintendo entry is concerned, I could sum it up in 5 words. Gunforce. Great name, lame game. The end. Good night.